We continue now with the fifth reading of the Passion history. Then the whole multitude of them arose and bound Jesus, led him from Caiaphas to the praetorium, and it was early morning. Then Judas, who had betrayed him, when he saw that he was condemned to death, felt remorse, and brought back the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and elders, saying, I have sinned in that I have betrayed innocent blood. And they said, What is that to us? You see to that. And he threw down the pieces of silver in the temple, departed, and went and hanged himself, and he burst open in the middle, and all his entrails gushed out. And the chief priest took the silver pieces and said, It is not lawful to put them into the treasury, because they are the price of blood. And they took counsel and bought with them the potter's field to bury strangers in. And it became known to all those dwelling in Jerusalem, so that to this day that field is called in their own language Akeldama, that is, the field of blood. Then was fulfilled what was spoken by Jeremiah the prophet, saying, And they took the 30 pieces of silver, the value of him who was priced, whom they of the children of Israel priced, and gave them for the potter's field, as the Lord directed me. But the Jews did not go into the praetorium, lest they should be defiled, but that they might eat the Passover. Pilate then went out to them and said, What accusation do you bring against this man? They answered and said to him, If he were not an evildoer, we would not have delivered him up to you. And Pilate said to them, You take him and judge him according to your own law. Therefore the Jews said to him, It is not lawful for us to put anyone to death, that the saying of Jesus might be fulfilled, which he spoke, signifying by what death he would die. And the chief priests and elders began to accuse him, vehemently saying, We found this fellow perverting the nation and forbidding to pay taxes to Caesar, saying that he himself is a Christ, a king. Then Pilate entered the praetorium again, called Jesus, and asked him, saying, Are you the king of the Jews? Jesus stood before him and answered, Are you speaking for yourself, or did others tell you about me? Pilate answered, Am I a Jew? Your own nation and chief priests have delivered you to me. What have you done? Jesus answered, My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then my servants would fight, so that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now my kingdom is not from here. Pilate therefore said to him, Are you a king then? Jesus answered, You are right in saying that I am a king. For this cause I was born, and for this cause I came into the world, that I should bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth hears my voice. Pilate said to him, What is truth? And when he had said this, he went out again to the Jews and said to them, I find no fault in him at all. And the chief priests and elders accused him of many things, but he answered nothing. And Pilate asked him again, saying, Do you answer nothing? See how many things they testify against you? Do you not hear? But Jesus still answered nothing, so that Pilate marveled. But they were the more fierce, saying, He stirs up the people, teaching throughout all Judea, beginning from Galilee to this place. When Pilate heard of Galilee, he asked if the man were a Galilean. And as soon as he knew that he belonged to Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him to Herod, who himself was also in Jerusalem at that time. And when Herod saw Jesus, he was exceedingly glad, for he had desired for a long time to see him, because he had heard many things about him, and he hoped to see some miracle done by him. And he questioned Jesus with many words, but he answered him nothing. And the chief priests and scribes stood and vehemently accused him. And Herod, with his men of war, treated him with contempt and mocked him, arrayed him in a gorgeous robe, and sent him back to Pilate. And that same day, Pilate and Herod became mutual friends, for before they had been at enmity between themselves. And Pilate, when he had called together the chief priests, the rulers, and the people, said to them, You have brought this man to me as one who misleads the people. And indeed, having examined him in your presence, I have found no fault in this man concerning those things of which you accuse him. No, nor did Herod. For I sent you back to him, and indeed nothing worthy of death has been done by him. I will therefore chastise him and release him. Now at the feast, the governor was accustomed to releasing to the multitude one prisoner whom they wished. And there was at that time a notorious prisoner named Barabbas, who had been thrown into prison with his fellow insurrectionists who had committed murder in the insurrection made in the city. And the multitude, crying aloud, began to ask him to do just as he had always done for them. And when they gathered together, Pilate answered, You have a custom that I should release someone to you at the Passover. Whom do you want me to release to you, Barabbas or Jesus, the King of the Jews, who is called the Christ? For he knew that the chief priests had delivered him because of envy. While he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent him, saying, Have nothing to do with that just man, for I have suffered many things today in a dream because of him. But the chief priests and the elders stirred up the people and persuaded them that they should ask for Barabbas and destroy Jesus. The governor answered and said to them, Which of the two do you want me to release to you? The whole crowd cried out, saying, Away with this man, and release to us Barabbas. Pilate, therefore, wishing to release Jesus, spoke to them again. What then shall I do with Jesus, who is called the Christ? They all said to him, Crucify him! Crucify him! And he said to them the third time, Why? What evil has he done? I have found no reason for death in him. I will therefore chastise him and let him go. And they cried out more exceedingly, Crucify him! And they were insistent, demanding with loud voices that he be crucified. And the voices of these men and the chief priests prevailed. And Pilate took Jesus and scourged him. And the soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the praetorium and gathered the whole band of soldiers around him. And they stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him. And when they had twisted together a crown out of thorns, they put it on his head, and a reed in his right hand. And they bowed the knee before him and mocked him, and began to salute him, saying, Hail, King of the Jews! And they struck him in the face and spit on him, and took the reed and struck him on the head. And bowing the knee, they worshipped him. Pilate then went out again and said to them, Look, I am bringing him out to you that you may know that I find no fault in him. Then Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. And Pilate said to them, Behold the man. Therefore the chief priests and officers saw him. They cried out, saying, Crucify him! Crucify him! Pilate said to them, You take him and crucify him, for I find no fault in him. The Jews answered him, We have a law, and by our law he ought to die, because he made himself the Son of God. Therefore, when Pilate heard that saying, he was the more afraid, and went again into the praetorium and said to Jesus, Where are you from? But Jesus gave him no answer. Then Pilate said to him, Are you not speaking to me? Do you not know that I have power to crucify you and power to release you? Jesus answered, You could have no power at all against me, unless it had been given you from above. Therefore, the one who delivered me to you has the greater sin. From then on, Pilate sought to release him, but the Jews cried out, saying, If you let this man go, you are not Caesar's friend. Whoever makes himself a king speaks against Caesar. When Pilate therefore heard that saying, he brought Jesus out and sat down in the judgment seat in a place that is called the Pavement, but in Hebrew, Gabbatha. And it was the preparation day of the Passover, and about the 6th hour. And he said to the Jews, Behold your king. But they cried out, Away with him! Away with him! Crucify him! Pilate said to them, Shall I crucify your king? The chief priests answered, We have no king but Caesar. When Pilate saw that he could not prevail at all, but rather that a tumult was rising, he gave sentence that it should be as they requested. And he took water and washed his hands before the multitude, saying, I am innocent of the blood of this just person. You see to it. And all the people answered and said, His blood be on us and on our children. Then he released to them Barabbas, whom they requested, who had been thrown into prison for insurrection and murder. But he delivered Jesus, after he had scourged him, to their will, to be crucified. Here ends the reading. Praise be to God.